What's up YouTube, I'm Guy, and today on the channel we are going to be reviewing a Glycine Combat Sub. I have been wanting to check out one of these watches for quite a while now, and fortunately one of the viewers of the channel reached out to me and said, hey, I've got one of these, if you'd like to check it out I can send it over to you. And yeah, I was super excited. I said, yeah, definitely, I'd love to, and now we have it here today. I owe that viewer a very big apology. I was sick for like a month, and you probably noticed all through February and most of March, I've only put out maybe like 5 videos. It's just been way behind on my YouTube schedule, as well as everything else in my normal life. So again, I apologize for how long it has taken me to get this review done and published to YouTube. But hopefully you guys will enjoy it, and yeah, we'll jump right into it. First things first, this is a Glycine Combat Sub, reference 3863.3. It's an older reference that's no longer in their current catalog, but there is a watch in their current catalog that's almost identical. It is the GL0091. All of the combat subs in the current Glycine catalog have that GL00XX reference number naming convention. So yeah, the GL0091 is the one that is most closely related to this 3863.3. The differences on that one that's in their current catalog mainly is the bracelet that it comes on. That one now comes on a steel mesh bracelet as opposed to the oyster style bracelet that this one comes on. I kind of prefer the bracelet that this one has, if I'm being honest. I'm not a big fan of that shark mesh style bracelet. For me, you know, it's just not what I prefer. Maybe one of you guys would enjoy it. There's several other combat subs in their catalog, ranging in different sizes, different slight variations to dial configuration, and as well bezel color. The one that I like the best is the GL0067, yeah, black on black. The dial is kind of got a military field watch aesthetic. It has the 24 hours scale on it. I think that one's really cool. But the one that we have here today is also cool, and I am excited to show it to you. First things first, though, before we dive into the tabletop portion of this review, let's talk about the company Glycine. A few years ago, it was sold to the Invicta watch company, and collectors, probably that were at least collectors that were interested in Glycine watches in general, probably all kind of gasped a little bit and thought to themselves, oh no, are they going to Invicta these watches up? Well, I don't think that they have in the few years that Invicta has been the ownership of Glycine, and there was a statement that came out, I don't know if it was from the CEO or the president, somebody higher up the chain of command over there at Invicta, that said, you know, we're just going to let Glycine be Glycine. We're going to let them do what they do. We're not going to interfere with the production and the design and all that stuff, and assured collectors and enthusiasts and basic consumers that Glycine will remain true to form. It's just under a new umbrella. Whether or not that remains to be the way that things are in the future, I mean, time will tell. But as I would say, you know, in the past couple of years up until this point, I think for the most part it has pretty much stayed true to their roots. None of their watches jump out at you like the big sort of, I don't know, ostentatious Invicta dive watches that are 49, 50, 51 and up millimeters. They're not doing those crazy flashy blingy watches over there at Glycine. We still have a big focus on dive watches and aviation styled and inspired watches over there, and there's a lot of cool stuff in their catalog. Now I'm going to jump over to the tabletop here. We're going to take a close look at this combat sub, and then yeah, when I'm finished we'll come back over here and we will do some final thoughts, some closing thoughts, let you guys know what I think in general, and yeah, close out this review. So I'll be right back. Alright guys, here we have the Glycine Combat Sub. Again, this is reference 3863.3. I'll give you the basic specifications about this watch real quick here. We have a case diameter of 42 millimeters with 22 millimeter lugs. From lug to lug, from one end of the case to the other, it comes in at a measurement of about 50 millimeters. And probably the highlight about this watch, vis-a-vis the dimensions anyway, is the thickness. This is a very thin 11 millimeters thick. And if you look at the profile of the lugs, you can see that it curves downward a lot more than watches typically do, specifically dive watches. You usually get a much more flat lug angle than this downward arcing curve. So between that 11 millimeter, sorry, I forgot the number there, 11 millimeter thickness and the shape of the lugs on this case, this is going to be a low riding watch. You can also see that the bezel doesn't stand real tall, it doesn't angle upwards, and the crystal is a very, very flat crystal. All of those factors together, yeah, makes this a really nice low riding, pretty thin watch, specifically for a dive watch. Other features about this watch that are actually pretty impressive, we have again, flat crystal, but it is a sapphire crystal, and it does have AR coating, so it is anti-reflective. And I mean, of course, in this very bright studio light condition, there is reflections, but you're not seeing a whole ton of reflections that make the watch illegible like you might find on some other similarly priced, more affordable entry-level watches. Now we have a screw-down crown over here, which is signed with the Glycine logo, if I can get the glare and the camera to focus here. And we'll talk about that logo a little bit more here in a minute, because that's the old Glycine logo. It's not the same logo that they are currently using on present generation watches. But we do have a screw-down crown there with crown guards protruding off of the side of the case. 300 meter water resist, which is pretty much, I think, what you would want from a dive watch these days. Most dive watches are 200 at a minimum. Some come in at 100 millimeters, and people kind of complain about that. Now, another thing to talk about as far as features, this does have C1 Super Luminova Lume on the markers on the dial, the handset, and the pip up at the 0 marker on the unidirectional bezel. I'll bring in some video of this Lume. It's not bad, but as you'll see in this video, the handset, the hour hand, the minute hand, and the pip on the second hand, significantly brighter than the markers on the dial, the Arabic numerals, and the markers on the outer chapter ring area. It's not awful by any stretch of the imagination, but if you look at them, comparatively, it's just not a really even application of Lume. It's bright enough, especially on the handset, to be legible, but I wish that it was a little bit more evenly applied. Not a major complaint, but, if I'm being honest and objective and, telling you everything that I have found out about this watch, that's one thing, at least on this example, that I do take note of. Now, of course, this watch is running the Glycine GL224 movement, which is really just a modified ETA 2824-2 movement. And the level of modifications that we're talking about here are probably just decorations. And while this doesn't have a display case back, I would imagine that the rotor on the automatic movement is probably branded with some sort of glycine embellishments. Other than that, I don't think that there's any differences between it and a typical ETA 2824-2 movement. It's a 28,800 vibration per hour movement. It's good. It's ubiquitous with Swiss watches in general. Highly reliable, fairly accurate for a relatively entry-level movement, and no complaints there whatsoever. And of course, this movement and this watch in general does have a date complication over at the 3 o'clock position. We do have a unidirectional dive bezel, or elapsed time bezel. And some people are going to complain about this. This particular one is a green aluminum insert, which is nice. But the thing that people are probably going to complain about it is that it is only 60 clicks. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we get to the first marker. On a 120 click bezel, that would take, 10 clicks. This is only a 60 click unidirectional bezel. Now, because this is such a thin watch, and because that bezel is not sloped or very tall in general, it is a little bit on the difficult side to get a good purchase on it to rotate it. The edging, I guess you'd call that like a coin edge, the serrations on the edge, the texture, it's good. You get a good bite on it. It's just because the bezel is so low down. If your hands are a little bit oily or moist or damp at all, it can be just a little bit difficult to manipulate. It's not impossible, and if I dig my fingernails into those coin edges, you can see I can obviously manipulate it. But Not as easy to manipulate as some other dive watches that I have experience with, but I do like the bezel, particularly that it's so low profile. Again, keeping that watch very, very short, very, very down to the wrist. Now the graduations on this aluminum bezel, pretty standard. You have hash marks from the 1 to 15, and then just your 20, 25, 30, and so on. There's this little tab up at the 12 o'clock marker in the middle of the bezel, which might aid a bit in getting a grip on this bezel. That's somewhat atypical. I don't think that I've ever seen just a little extra tab there on any other dive watches. Now, Breitling watches have what they call the rider tabs at the 15, 30, 45, and the 12 position. That's not exactly the same thing, but yeah, that little tab there does potentially help in the manipulation of the bezel. Again, up at the 12 o'clock side of the bezel, we do have a lume pip there. None of the rest of the graduations or markers on the bezel are lumed, though. It's just printed, again, on aluminum, in this case, a green insert, but they do come in a multitude of different colors within the Glycine Combat Sub catalog. Now, aside from the size of the case, it's a fairly typical case. This is, of course, a used watch, pre-owned, pre-loved, if you will. So you can see there is, more than a few little scratches on the polished flanks of the case. And then the tops of the case, the lugs, have a nice satin brushed finish, which matches up really well with the bracelet. Over at the 3 o'clock side, we also have polished flanks and, these sort of sharp almost crown guards. Not sharp in that they'll cut you, but just the angle of attack, the way that it comes out to the crown itself, kind of like a steep slope there. The crown is, of course, a screw down crown. It has really good texturing on the crown, very easy to unscrew. In the realm of affordable watches, this has some of the best, screw action, threading it in and out, that you're going to find on any dive watch that I've experienced, honestly. It's excellent. Watches like Seiko's, typically you have to fight with the crown to get it screwed in and screwed out. That's not the case here, and I'm really happy that they at least went the extra mile on the crown to make it so refined, I guess is how I would describe it. It's really well done. This is, of course, a hand winding and hacking movement, so when the crown is pulled out to the first position, you can hand wind the movement. And pull it out to the second position to quick set the date, and the final third position to hack the movement. You can see that the second hand stops running. Pretty typical for ETA movements, most Seiko movements except their lower end ones. More affordable priced watches in this tier of watch. They all feature that pretty much. Pushing the crown back in, and a little downward pressure screws that crown right back in. Again, super smooth, super easy. I really do like that aspect of the watch. One other thing to note about the case is you probably noticed when I'm showing you the profile, we do have drilled lug holes. Now this is the previous generation, again this 3863.3 reference number. The new ones do not come with drilled lug holes. It's kind of a letdown. I like drilled lug holes on my watches. Yeah, it probably takes away from the the aesthetic or the beauty, but it is super functional and it's really handy if you like changing out your bracelet to different straps, be it NATO straps, silicone rubber straps, or even leather. Having those drilled lug holes makes that process much, much easier, and I really do like that. Now, as I had mentioned in the intro, this is not a current generation. I'll bring in a picture of the current generation, the GL0091. Everything about the watch is basically the same, with the exception of the bracelet on the new GL series. It comes on like a metal mesh or steel mesh bracelet as opposed to the oyster style bracelet that the current one that I have here is on. There's a small difference in the dial as well. If you look at the logo on the GL series that I have up on the screen, the logo is a little bit different than the logo on the one that I currently have on loan. The one that I have on loan sort of has more of a crown-like logo. I think that this was changed around the time that the ownership of the Glycine company was changed. So you might be able to identify, if you were buying a pre-owned watch, is this pre-Invicta or post-Invicta? That logo is one potential giveaway. Also, the text at the bottom on the watch that I have here on loan, it just says Combat and Sub 28 ATMs. On the new one, there's a little bit of a different notation as far as the text is concerned on the lower 6 o'clock portion of the dial. And speaking of the dial, I really like the dial on these Glycine Combat Subs. This has Arabic numerals with a really nice intricate chapter ring and markers at each of the 5-minute with rectangular markers at the 15, 30, 45, and 12. It's not just another Rolex Submariner homage or knockoff. It is really its own style. It's pretty unique. Now, some of the other watches in the Combat Sub line also have a 24-hour scale just inside of the standard Arabic numerals. I actually like that even more, and I wish that this one had that, but this one does not. And that GL0091, the similar model in their current catalog line, it doesn't have those either. The one that I like the most is the GL0076. It's a black bezel, black dial variation with that extra 24-hour scale on the dial. That one looks really cool. It's kind of like a hybrid field watch / dive watch, and I just really dig that aesthetic. This one, again, does not have that, but the layout of the dial is nice. It's good. I do like it. Of course, again, we have date over at the 3 o'clock position, white text on a black date wheel, outlined with a little white outline. Something that's a little weird about the design of this watch that I don't love, the handsets, in particular the hour hand. This is kind of a Rolex Mercedes style handset, at least the hour hand, with the exception of that Mercedes symbol inside that circular portion of the hour hand. So it looks like it's trying to be a Rolex Mercedes handset, but it's missing something. I just wish they would have done a totally unique style on the handset. You know, that's just me. The second hand, instead of having the little circle lollipop pip out at the end, has more of a rectangular loomed marker. That's kind of cool, I guess. But yeah, that hour hand, something about it just feels a little bit off to me. Certainly not a make or break deal, but, you know, just one little thing that if I could change aesthetically on this watch, I probably would. Last thing I want to cover on this watch is the bracelet. Again, it's a 22mm lug width bracelet. It is decent, but not great. At the price point that we're approaching here, retail prices at or above $500, I would probably expect something a little bit better. We do have solid end links and, decent, solid 3-piece oyster-style linked bracelet. The main problem, probably going to be the clasp. Also, it's just friction pins holding this all together. You would think on a watch at this price point that was probably competing with something like the Steinhardt, it would have screws instead of friction pins on the bracelet links that hold it all together, but unfortunately, no. Again, the clasp, that's really kind of the downfall. We have the Glycine logo, Swiss, and the little crown there. It does have a fold-over safety latch, and then dual button deployment. The swing arm isn't bad. You can see that it is a machined or milled, dense, thick metal swing arm, but the clasp itself is just this super thin, low quality clasp. The push buttons kind of feel a little, not loose, but I don't know how I would describe it. Just not very high quality. We do have 4 points of micro adjustment, which is nice, but yeah, it definitely could be a better clasp. That's probably one of the shortcomings of this watch. But honestly, at sub $500 watches or watches in that price bracket, that's usually the downfall, is the clasp. But yeah, that could be stepped up a little bit, and the friction pins, that could be stepped up to screws, and we'd have a really solid offering here as far as the bracelet's concerned. So in closing, what do I have to say about this Glycine Combat Sub? I think it's a cool watch. It is not a Rolex Submariner homage watch. For the most part, there's, some maybe very subtle tiny cues, but certainly not a Submariner homage whatsoever. I think that's going to appeal to a lot of people that want something different. There is, the handset that I talked about. It's like sort of a Mercedes style handset. It doesn't have that Mercedes symbol in the middle of the hour hand, but otherwise it's the same shape. If it were me, I would have changed that to be a little bit more distinct and unique, but it's not a deal breaker. As far as, price point, this probably isn't a super value of a watch. It's not bad. It seems to be a nice, good, high-quality watch at the kind of edges of entry level. When I think of entry level, I think of watches around the $200 to $300 price point when we're talking about mechanical or automatic watches. It's not quite there, but you know, at least the newer watches that are currently in their catalogs, not this older reference number, of course, can be found online for probably a little over $500, below $600 is where I'm seeing them on places like Amazon and other watch retail sites. So the price could be a hair better in my opinion for what you're getting, but certainly not outrageous. You know, I mentioned it in the tabletop, but the big really cool thing about this watch is, you know, the thinness. It is a very thin watch for a automatic dive watch. Comes in at, let me double check my notes, yeah, about 11 millimeters in thickness. Yeah, that's fantastic. Most dive watches, particularly at this price point, you know, sub $500 or thereabouts, we're talking 13 plus millimeters in thickness, whereas at 11, I don't know of any other automatic dive watches that are, you know, coming in at that thinness. The rest of the size dimensions are a little bit big. Not for most people though, just for me. I mean, what do we have? 42 millimeters, 22 millimeter lugs, and a 50 millimeter lug to lug from the extremities of the top to the bottom of the case. It wears a little bit big, but it's not bad. I think most people are fine with 42 millimeter watches that have 50 millimeter lugs. But I don't know, lately I've been liking smaller and smaller stuff. That's just me. My wrist size, 6 3/4 inches. Yeah, I just prefer stuff to be a little bit on the smaller side. But, you know, other than that, really there's not any complaints about this watch. It's nice, it's good quality, it's got a good ETA movement in it. And, you know, overall I do like it. Flat sapphire crystal, bezel is decent, 60 clicks instead of 120. I don't think that really matters, honestly. But, you know, some people are going to complain. It's you know, it should be 120, dive watch, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. That's not a big deal. But yeah, overall, I do like it quite a bit. Would I recommend it? If it's something that you just kind of connect with stylistically, yeah, sure. Are there other options on the market at or slightly below that price point that might be better picks? Probably. But I'm never going to begrudge somebody that says, well, this is what I like and this is what I want. And if it's a little bit more expensive than the next thing, I don't care. I want to pay that extra money and get exactly what I want. I don't blame you, you know, do that. So yeah, that's basically my review of the Glycine Combat Sub. I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to help out the channel like this viewer did and loan me a watch, you can reach out to me via email at justbluefish@gmail.com. Other ways you could help out the channel that would really make my day is if you go over and become a Patreon supporter, number one, or the easiest way that you can help support the channel that costs you absolutely nothing is to click my affiliate Amazon associate link. That is found in the description of every video that I put out. Every time you buy anything, it doesn't have to be what I'm reviewing. It can be dog food, new shoes, a book, whatever. I get a small commission if you buy it through my Amazon link. That really does add up, and I appreciate all of you guys that take advantage of that link down in the description of my videos. So yeah, that's about it. Until next week, I will say goodbye. I hope you have a good Easter weekend that's coming up here. And yeah, we'll have another review here soon. I got a bunch of watches on loan that I need to get through and get returned to their owners. And again, I apologize to everybody for being sick for feels like a month now. But I'm finally back on the mend, and I'm going to get to those videos soon. All right, guys. Talk to you later. Bye now.